So believe it or not, the government has banned private wells. Private well ownership is no longer allowed. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But for now, I want to talk about this well before they find out I have it. Of course, I'm on YouTube, so you know. I think one of the things about living off-grid is people don't realize the importance of water. It's one of the things that you need to think about first. Before you think about how you're going to get electric or how you're going to raise food or any of it, water is the most critical and it's the most overlooked. I've been watching newer off-grid channels, you know, people who've just started, and it seems like they have an idea of what they want to do, but when they actually put that idea into place, into practice, it doesn't work. As a matter of fact, I just watched an off-grid channel, and he's been in, well, they have been off-gridding for a very, very long time. And I just discovered that they didn't have a water plan when they first started. Their plan was rain catchment. Everybody talks about rain catchment. We're going to rain catchment. But rain catchment seems to always not work right off the bat. Then you're in a struggle. It really is a struggle for life. How are you going to obtain water? Well, according to this off-gridder that's been doing it for a very, very, very long time, they weren't off-grid. They were going over to family and friends' houses and getting buckets of water and gallons of water, bringing it home. And so they're constantly traveling, constantly wasting gas. And that water probably isn't off-grid. It's hooked up to electric, maybe with a well or public utilities. Another off-gridder I just found out is going to neighbors' houses to get water because their system didn't work. I'm not against rain catchment. It's a good idea. But boy, if you're going to do it, you really need to have a solid plan in place before you even think about doing anything else, and then test the plan. Here, we couldn't do rain catchment. I checked this out a long time ago before we moved here. There are equations on Google that tell you how much roof space you're going to need to collect water for the amount of rain that you get in your area. So you go to Google to say how much rain does this town in Missouri get, and it'll tell you on average how much it gets per year. Now recognize that may be all in the spring and fall time. Like right here, most of our rain is in the spring and fall. So you got to have enough containers to capture all that rain and store it. If you're in Arizona, same thing. It's a big rainy season once a year, and then the rest of the year you don't get any rain. You got to be ready for that. Well, we live in a tiny house, so our roof space is very limited. The big YouTuber I was talking about, they have a huge barn or garage or something. I mean, it's huge, massive. And he keeps up with their water demands for their animals. Think about that, your animals. Our animals use actually are chickens. I would suggest that rain catchment isn't the greatest idea to start with. If you're going to spend a year or two building things so you can collect water and you know how much water you need to collect, the other thing is you need to figure out how you're going to thaw it out. You got to be able to move that water around or be able to transport that water from your downspout to a location that is warm, into a barn. Remember, you live off grid, so whatever you're trying to heat, you have to do with wood heat. And that's the thing that I couldn't do, is I didn't, even if we did rain catchment, I wouldn't be able to store the water in the wintertime. It would freeze. We have an IBC tank, and I'm just going to explain this real quick. This is our well. We run it off a generator or solar. We can do both. Now, this particular generator is a propane gasoline dual fuel generator, and I've been running it off propane. The other one we have is just a gasoline generator, but we can run this off solar also. It's just easier to run it off a generator. If SHTF ever happened, I always have a backup process. I can also run a hand pump down here, and I can hand pump the water out with a simple pump. There is one that I specifically want. I'm just trying to find it. I've talked about that before. It only goes down 100 feet. Now, these shallow wells, a lot of people say, oh, you just hand dig a well. Well, you could hand dig a well or a lake or get it out of the stream. But I think one of the things is people are completely unprepared for what that tastes like. And the requirements to filter that so you can get the taste out. Our best experience about water collection was when we were nomads. I learned the value of water real quick as nomads. Trying to get water. You know, we could only store 40 gallons, and you'd be out in the national forest miles away from any water source. So we had to really figure out how we were going to reduce the amount of water we were using. There was a few times we had to collect it from a stream. Now we have a Berkey. And the Berkey's great, filters out everything. You really wouldn't have any concerns drinking water right out of a muddy pond. The problem with the Berkey is it gets clogged up really quick. So just like any filter, if it gets clogged, it's either going to need cleaned or replaced. So you try not to clog it. We have filters on this. I'm not going to get into all the explanation, but there's occasions where the water will get dirty in the well. Long story, it's not a big deal. We've all figured it out now. I'm not going to go through it again. But if I run that dirty water through our little house filters that we got, they'll instantly clog up, and then I got to change them. Well, that's money, that's cost. Again, if SHTF were to happen, you're not going to be able to filter the water. When we were nomads, our camper burned down, and we were at a campsite that had a water faucet, a real spigot. But it was really, really, really rusty water. So while we were there, we were filtering the water, never even noticed the rust. But when our camper burned down, it took the Berkey out also. Well, I was thirsty. I was trying to put that fire out. Man, I was so thirsty. And so I drank that water raw. Oh, it was the worst thing I think I've ever had. It was terrible tasting. It had the sulfur in it. It had that rust. It was terrible. And so you really have to consider, am I going to be able to drink the water once I get it out of the ground? Am I going to be able to filter it? The thing is rainwater catchment is actually quite dirty. Your roof is very dirty. Bird droppings and all that. Now, imagine that. We talk about chickens. They can carry salmonella and all that. Well, so can birds. So the rain catchment has to be filtered. You have to filter it or boil it one way or another. Now, remember, boiling takes energy, wood. So you're going to have to consider all this. We have a natural spring down the hill. So if something were ever to happen to our well, which I can't imagine what would, because we have so many backup systems. There's hand pumps, generators, 2 generators, and a solar panel system. We got so many ways, but if all that failed, we could still go down to the natural spring and collect water down there. And it's pretty clean. Of course, I would still Berkey it or boil it. Now, another thing we do is we put bleach in our water. So we pump it from the well into the tank, and then we put bleach in it to keep it from growing moss, and if there's any bacteria in the well that we didn't know about, it can kill the bacteria. That bleach will evaporate out. So it's another way of purifying your water. Then we Berkey the water, so that takes the bleach out also. So all remnants of anything that we drink is gone. How are you going to purify it so it's safe to drink? How are you going to clean it so you can even stand the taste? And are you going to be able to collect enough? And I think that's the biggest failure of new off-gridders, is they are overwhelmingly unprepared for their water situation. They just go in it thinking, I have an idea, this is what I'm going to do, and then when the idea fails, they don't have anything else. Our big deal was we were going to find a place with a well, and we actually found 2 when we were looking. 2 places, one with 10 acres, and then this one. We loved this place. It was just a better deal. It was a safer deal. The other one wanted to do I forget what kind of deed, but it wasn't actually through the deed company. So we liked this place. It had a well, but this well needed a lot of repair. And so I've built a well house around it, put a well liner in it, and we've gotten this thing, I would say, at least 80% better. Then like I said, we pump this into the IBC tank, and then we take an RV pump and we pump it into the house when we need it. That way we don't have to have solar trying to run this big old well pump way down there in the well. We can pump it in the house. So that little RV pump takes 6 amps, and we can run that 24 hours a day. We use a 110 volt well pump. We found it on Amazon. I was really lucky to find that. Now, one of the things we have to worry about is water freezing. We don't want the water to freeze up here. So I drilled a hole probably 70 feet down right into the black pipe. There's a black pipe that comes up. That black pipe has a hole in it. And so when I'm done pumping, all the water falls back down the pipe, and that way it won't freeze. It takes a good 15 seconds for that water to come fill that pipe back up and come out, but it's worth it just so it doesn't freeze in the winter. And that has saved us a ton. The IBC tank is outside in this box, and we've insulated this, and then we pump heat from the house through a series of ventilation ducts into this box, and that keeps it warm so it doesn't freeze in the winter. So we've had that for 2 winters now, and last year we finally got all the kinks worked out of it, and it didn't freeze last year. Even having a very solid plan, a system that worked as soon as we got here, we still had a freezing problem. Wasn't too unexpected. As long as the well didn't freeze, we were okay because we could still run the pump, fill up buckets, and we had plenty of water. But that may all change soon. Governments are starting to require people to pay for the water they use out of their own well. Just recently, government in California, I think it's LA County, they're so desperate for water because Lake Mead is emptying and you know the whole mess. I'm sure you saw news on it. Well, they're desperate for water, so they're trying to figure out what they can do to get water and get money so they can get more water. So they've told the residents of California, I think starting in January, that they're going to have to start paying for the water usage. So they have to hook up a meter. And the thing is, it's all on the homeowner. So now think about this. The homeowner had to pay to dig the well. The homeowner has to pay to run the well pump with electricity cost. And the homeowner now has to pay for the water they take out of the ground. Here in Missouri, the water under your property is yours. It's in the laws. So the county can't come in and say the water is theirs. But the federal government back in 2010 time frame, somewhere around there, had discussed making water public property, that it was owned by the government. Like airspace. Airspace, they consider public property. So if you use a ham radio, you have to have a license from the FCC, I think. Well, why do you have to have a FCC license? Well, because the airwaves, they consider public property. Well, that's what they're trying to do with water. And there's a lot of states that have already done it successfully. I think Oregon and Washington, I'm not 100% sure about all these states. California, consider water public property. So like if you have a stream, you can't divert that stream water to feed your cows. You have to let it continue to flow the way they want it to flow. And they'll decide who gets it. For example, the Lake Mead situation. California gets the most of that water by contract. So water comes through Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona. I don't know what all the states are. And they come through all those states. But I think Mexico, the country, and California get the most water out of it by contract. Because the government has decided who's going to get what water because it's public water. And in some of these states, they actually consider rainwater public water. So if you'll click this next box, I'd really appreciate it. Taking the next video where I talked about water. So I hope I can inspire you to think hard about water if you're going to live off grid, so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.